And hey, everybody, it's the Tim and Daniel show. It's Monday, May 6th, and we're wrapping up week 6 of the business of wine. I'm going to go ahead and get us right over to sharing the screen here. All right. So the topic for tonight, and I think it's pretty timely because I know that it's a topic Daniel's interested in. And so the general topic is understanding the market. From the very beginning, I hope you know by now, the wine industry has just an interminably long lag period from ideation to final product. And while there are many shortcuts these days, when you're making a decision, what am I going to plant? Where am I going to focus my attention? Where do you turn for the data to figure that out? So I'm just going to run through this real quickly, and then we're going to talk about a couple of other things. Uses of consumption and sales data are to really get present to what are the supply and demand cycles. All right. So if you go back and you look at the charts, you know, what's global consumption, per capita consumption in different countries, which what's the general state of the market, and then drilling down into more and more individual geographic areas or demographic areas and so forth to see what's going on with supply and demand. And then developing new products, obviously looking at, you know, what's hot and what's not. There are so many flash in the pan products that come out or focus. And what's kind of funny is, and this is just the world according to Tim as an aside, you know, I was around for the whole white Zinfandel phenomenon, and everybody talked about, oh, it'll never last, it's a flash in the pan, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's still a big, big deal, and it's been displaced by Moscato, so the consumers aren't really any different. We finally browbeat them into feeling embarrassed enough to want to move to something else. So white Zinfandel drinkers basically migrated over to Moscato, and that brings up another big point. If something is showing a big trend, and vineyards are being planted, and the you know, a wine like Syrah is a really good example in the past 10 years. Where are those consumers going? So not only what did people start drinking, what are they drinking now, but if and when they do change, what do they migrate to? All right, so that's looking at consumer migration. The use of wine consumption that we're going to talk with Daniel, and kind of use that as an illustration of a number of different things that you can look at, and that's the forecasting for grape supply. Then there's predicting production volumes and so forth. That is all part of, you know, the forecasting of the grapes, predicting the production volumes, looking at supply and demand. Where are consumers going? You also use wine consumption and sales data for measuring the product success in a market. So you can track on an individual basis, you versus the competition, you versus the category, and your individual product. And then a real important use as well is for preparing for growth or expansion, okay? And that'll be fun, Daniel, when we're talking about your choices, you know, what should you plant and why? What are the long-term, you know, forecasts? And then what if it's a big success, what do you do? Right?
Right.
Okay. We're going to look at this kind of data. This is AC Nielsen, and we're going to talk about, number one, how challenging it is to find the data. Number two, how challenging it is to figure out, let's just say as an example, you plan to make a Chardonnay or a Pinot Noir or a Cabernet or something like that. How do you really drill into your specific market, and then what kind of market share you're intending to achieve, or what kind of volumes? So how this also interrelates is over here on your business plan. And as a reminder, this is we're going to start in this on earnest next week. So on Wednesday, we're going to transition into week 7. And week 7 and 8 is primarily for your time to work on your final projects and your original project if you never turned that in. And then it's also I'll start introducing some of the thoughts that I have for wine, the future, and what the future holds for wine. Okay, so in your wine business plan, one of the things that you're going to be asked to do after the basics about your product and your winery, your mission, your vision and goals, and that kind of stuff, is defining markets and market strategies. So we're gonna talk about segmentation tomorrow. Today we're just going to talk mostly about data and forecasting and that kind of stuff. And then Wednesday I'm going to start to get into market segments. Okay, so we'll talk about this more. All right. Any questions about that, Mr. Daniel?
Nope.
All righty. Some of the places when I send this to you as a PDF, Wines and Vines actually has a new analytics facet to their business. They've always included some market data, and it's fairly useful. Just sort of on a month-by-month check-in and see where things are going. But there's also market data from the Wine Institute. If you go to the TTB site, the government site, they have a lot of market data there. You can go in and see the kind of data that Nielsen collects, and there's a site called PivotStream, and what I discovered, I don't know, I think it might be around the time, we'll need somebody to check this out, and that is, you can go to PivotStream, and sometimes they give you access to the IRI Nielsen reports for free for a month. It's very cool when that happens. So if you like that kind of stuff, that can be valuable. Wine Market Council does a lot of consumer research, and then also the Silicon Valley Bank Wine Report has its trends, its data, and that kind of stuff. So the data's out there. One of the really key things to temper all this is, what's the source of the data? Who's collecting it? When they're looking at the samples, how large a sample does it represent? So, for example, IRI Nielsen's obviously one of the biggest data companies, in the world. And for the longest time, their wine data was exclusively just grocery stores. And it was only grocery stores of products that actually had the scan code on it. And not that long ago, a lot of wines didn't. So over time, the quality of Nielsen has increased dramatically, number one, because everybody's got a barcode virtually. If you're in a store, you've got to have it now. And they've also expanded the reach of their data collection so that they do a lot of the big box stores and things like Total Wines and more and that kind of stuff. And then they've also been working hard, and this is much harder data to collect, to get restaurant sales. Now, if you want to look at restaurant sales, you can look at the Wine and Spirits magazine. Every year it has an annual restaurant report. But a word of caution, it's a very limited sample set, and it tends to focus on high-end wines. All right. So anyways, there's a number of places to go take a look. Then what I want you to do, if you are so inclined, I want you to go into these websites. You got Vellum Wines, you got Charles Smith Wines, CH Wines is the, what's his name? The Negociant guy. Kiepersol that we've talked about. Here's one you would never go to on your own. Turtle Run Winery in Corydon, Indiana. Then also go to us.nakedwines.com. Look at their business model. Look at the things they're doing and the novel approach that they have, not only of how they're addressing the market, but how they're addressing procurement and the supply chain and what they're doing there, okay? All right, so, and before we get to Daniel's stuff, I then wanted to go in, and this is what an IRI or Nielsen wine report looks like. I'm going to send you an Excel copy of these. These are over a year old, but they will give you they'll show you the kind of data that's collected, how they look at things, how people look at things in terms of trends and what kind of things are being measured. So for example, here you can see Chardonnay, and I don't know why it's, and that it's showing, you know, current dollars. This is for a 26-week period ending January 28th of 2017. So they look at current sales for the 26-week, you know, 6-month period. Sales year ago, change, and the current share, and whether the share is up or down, et cetera, et cetera. And hang on, I've got to move my screen out of the way. The other thing you'll see is that there's a lot of other fields that you can't see in here yet, okay? So they look at average bottle pricing. Is that going up or down? It's a lot of data. So this is also the sort of the macro look at grape varieties and different categories. So you can see sparkling wine, all other, as an example here. You've got White Zinfandel, and you can see that White Zin is down and Moscato is up. But if you are doing something in the Moscato market, this does not tell the whole story about Moscato, which has been just on fire, because here's other Moscatos that are, because, you know, there are red Moscatos actually. There's sweet red, which a lot of those are sparkling Moscato. So if you actually combine red Moscato, the blush Moscato, most of the sweet red, sparkling Moscato, and then Moscato itself, it's actually typically the #3 selling variety in the United States. And of course, that's rarely on anybody's radar. Okay? By the way, when we get to talking about what you can plant, you ought to plant some Moscato. I'll tell you why.
Okay.
So this is a kind of macro look. Now, what you can do, and this is why if you can get into that website that I was telling you about a minute ago, the pivotstream.com. What you then can do is you can say, okay, well, I want to look at a certain variety or something else. So, for example, this is Malbec. So again, we're looking at the same period. And how many Malbecs do you think there are out there in the world, Daniel?
Well, I imagine there's a few, but mainly from Argentina. Isn't that the core of Malbec region?
Yep. And becoming quite a thing in a number of areas, but it's Moscato's looking like it's going to start, or I'm sorry, Malbec looks like it's going to start trending down.
Right.
And a year ago, January, there were 530 different individual wines that qualify for Malbec variety in the U.S.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is what I want to point out from a marketing standpoint, how unbelievably crowded the marketplace is. These people are calling on the stores. These people are selling online. These people are pounding in the restaurants and trying to get their share of the market. And how do you do that? How do you fight that? And then the third example, I'm not going to spend a lot of these times. I'll spend a lot of time on these. Here's an import category, Montepulciano, and again, if you go down and scroll down, there's 115 Montepulcianos in the market.
Wow.
So I mean, it's pretty amazing, and I don't like spreadsheets, but I love going in and kind of, well, what about this and what's going on here and so on and so forth. And again, you can see the changes up and down. And at this point, a year ago, it'd be really interesting to see where, for example, Bosco Montepulciano went from kind of out of nowhere. It was showing 80% growth in a, change versus a year ago. So you've got these sometimes really wild swings of sales and preferences and so forth. Okay. All right. So that's how data looks in another way. And then what I wanted to do for the remainder of our time is kind of talk with Daniel. And did you do your blending?
We did some, yeah, informal notes at this point. But to be honest with you, it started last night when we got home. So there you go.
Yeah.
Those are the 4 varietals we started with.
Yeah. And again, highly recommended to do kind of a little bit more structure than this. And any kind of blending's fun to do. Did you guys end up with a wine that anybody preferred more than any of the unblended wines?
Yeah, and I don't have those notes in front of me, do I? But it was actually a blend of 4 with a predominance of the Petite Syrah and the Cabernet.
Got it. Yeah, to kind of give it that oomph, maybe the Tempranillo with a little bit more perfume.
Yeah.
And the funny thing was, were you surprised at all when you were doing the blending? It seems like there should be some sort of formula, right? If you add a little bit of this, it should have that effect. But the reality is sometimes there's a little bit of another wine can totally change the character of the wine in a totally unexpected way. Did that happen at all?
Very much so. It was amazing. We just changed around formulas a little bit. I to be honest, I had a lot of troubles with my sniffer yesterday because I'm having some allergy issues.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
But even still, just in tasting the wine, you can taste the differences. And even if you just adjusted up or down 10 or 20%, or omitted or added one wine, it was the changes were significant. You would go all the way from buttery vanilla oak flavors to a lot of berry cassis, totally different. Just to change it by a few degrees.
Yep. And the point I want to make about that from a business standpoint, again, people have this vision of wine. I ran across a Hallmark channel. The Hallmark. I never watched the Hallmark channel, but there was something that said wine as I was channel surfing, and it was the cheesiest romantic movie about a producer in Oregon going to the Grand Prix of Pinot Noir in Paris, falling in love with a Burgundian outcast son, and they were doing all these things. It's just, God, it just cracks my ass up what people see about this business and what the reality is. And the reality is, you look for certain markers of quality that go into an assemblage. You've got to be really careful when we first started, when I was at Beringer and we first started to add Cabernet Franc into the private reserve. It was from a vineyard, our own vineyard on Howell Mountain. It was just coming into quality enough to be considered into the private reserve. In the 5% of that Cabernet Franc into the entire reserve Cabernet Sauvignon blend totally dominated the entire blend. So it had to be backed off. So anyways, it's which to me is a lot more fun than the Hallmark version. So any questions or anything that you wanted to share about that, sir?
No, I would definitely plan on doing more of it, and I do have everything documented as far as percentages and whatnot. But we have, I haven't gone as far as rebottling blends.
Great, fun. Yeah, and why not? Go out, find some really good red wines that you love. See if you can come up with a blend and bottle them up. It's not that hard. Make your own house blend for your friends and your family and so forth. I've got let's see. I've got about 5 or 8 cases left. I actually blended this from material at Napa Wine Company, a custom crush facility in Oakville Grade and Highway 29. And you can actually make your own blend and then put your house label on it and whatever for private use and for gifts and so forth. All right, so I think last week we were discussing the topic of varietals, what's popular, what isn't. We're looking at now, where do you go for the data? How do you find out what's trending, and how do you look forward? So that gets us to Daniel's quest. I asked him to post this, and so let's discuss this a little bit. So go ahead and get the parameters or the situation analysis of where you are, Daniel.
Okay, so it's a 10-acre total property. About 9 acres is plantable. And right now we have 5 acres that's actually planted. The balance of the 4 acres was planted at one time, but they had a red blotch disease and they tore the vines out. So the infrastructure is there for that. It just needs to get replanted. So here's what we have. We have some Petite Sirah. We have 1.5 acres of Petite Sirah. And we have 2.5 acres of Primitivo. Now, my first question is, should we be marketing that as Primitivo or Zinfandel? Because I haven't been able to get a clear answer. And again, I'm just being told this is what it is. I haven't verified it.
Right.
So we know at least we've got the Petite Sirah and the Primitivo, and we're trying to decide because we need to make an arrangement with a nursery, fairly soon as far as what plants we want for next year.
Yeah.
That's where we're at. Other than pulling the weeds out.
Yeah. And and your hair. So in the supply chain end of things, you've got the property, part of it's producing. You've got some questions about what it's producing and validating that possibly, and then what to do about especially the Primitivo, which you've got a choice. The Primitivo could be sold as legitimately as Zinfandel. And then you've got an additional 4 acres that have been taken out that you now need to make the decision of what to plant. And so let's look downstream. What in terms of wines are you envisioning for the product mix, or what are you looking to do as a winery in your vision?
So honestly, we were really just thinking of planting Cabernet.
Right.
Now, a lot of people have said, there's a lot of Cabernet out there. Cabernet's been overdone, but let's face it, folks, a lot of people drink Cabernet. And we're also trying to think of what are 3 varietals that would work well together in our own blend. And the other thing I didn't mention to you I mentioned this before, is we have this wonderful deer fencing that goes entirely around the property. And we were actually toying around with the idea of maybe putting in another varietal just around the property, to add a 4th varietal. It wouldn't be a whole lot, but I think we could get maybe another couple tons out of it.
And using the fencing as the trellis?
Yeah, and I actually talked to a vineyard guy the other day. I said, well, what do we need to put anything in? He said, nope, you can just grow it right on the fencing. And to be honest with you, I saw this. This is not my original idea. My neighbors across the way that have a vineyard, they did that. And I said, well, what a smart idea. Well, when I talked to the lady, the only reason why they did that is because they were building a crush pad up there. And so they had a bunch of vines that they needed to move. So they pulled them out of the ground and they put them along their fence, and they're doing great.
Yeah. Well, this is the other thing. People think there's some exact science, and that's what the wineries, of course, want to portray. And whether it's Opus or whether it's Central Valley or the Languedoc or wherever in Australia or China or whatever, a lot of times it's just wild ass guesses that you take your best shot. Do you know the Paragon Vineyard in San Luis Obispo?
I have heard of that. Yes,
it's right at the airport when you're landing in the San Luis Obispo. Paragon Vineyards comes right up there. And I was out in the vineyard with Jim Eford, who used to be the vineyard manager, and we had a long and really great relation with Paragon Vineyards, with Behringer for Meridian Vineyards and some other stuff. And so we were doing I was conducting what we call train the trainer programs, and we're standing in the vineyards, and Jim's talking about the fog and the solar exposure and the hillsides and the drainage, and somebody said, what are those little clips on the bunches of grapes? And sure enough, if you looked on the vine, like sort of randomly, it wasn't like it. There were the clips that you used to close a bread bag. Those little plastic clips.
Yeah.
And Jim's like, oh, well, look over here. But hey, Jim, what's this? Well, let's go talk about this. It's like, come on, Jim, what the hell are those? He said, well, I thought I was going to be really smart. I planted my vineyards so that in the morning, the east side, we planted north and south with the idea that the east side, you get the sun in the morning. On the one side, when the sun's at its highest, you've got the canopy shade, and then in the evening, you've got the sun again. You'll get more even ripening. You avoid sunburn and maybe some issues, during the highest part of the sun. He said, what I didn't factor in, and I'm kicking myself in the butt for not factoring in, is that we've got fog in the morning, and the differential for ripening is like 2 weeks.
Wow.
And so what I mistakenly did is this entire block of the vineyards is just incredibly uneven ripening. So when flowering starts, I have the workers all go through and take these little clips and just put them on all the bunches that are flowering first. And then we know that those are going to be ripe about 2 weeks before all the other ones. So it's just an easy way for the pickers to say, okay, go out and pick the ones with the little clips on it, and then they got to go back later in 2 weeks and pick the ones that didn't have the clips.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
But with fences and with these different things, Beringer had a great vineyard that it had just planted right near the winery. It's called the Home Vineyard, and Ed Sabraja decided he wanted to do a trial with a higher density planting. He wanted to double the number of vines. So the vines were all going this way, let's say, and they planted new Cabernet in between each row and doubled the vine density and changed the rows to the opposite direction.
Wow.
Yeah. So now, have you gone into the grape report and done a little perusing to see what actually are the highest price grapes, what's trending? You should be able to kind of find that data.
Yeah, I mean, the data's there, but we're still trying to determine, what's the market value for our little property? How can we get our biggest bang out of our little 9 acres?
Right.
And that goes back to making maybe a couple of single barrel varietals versus, and also having a blend or two.
Right. Now here's the other. So the quandary becomes, and again, this is whether you're 400 acres or 40 acres or 4 acres. What's your route to channel? Are you going to sell these in your tasting room, or are you going to have a tasting room? Do you have a tasting room?
We don't have any of that yet.
So online, or are you going to try and get some distributed?
We are going to start by selling online.
Great.
And this year we're actually hoping to find someone to buy 50 to 70% of the grapes from us, because it's just too soon for us to get into full production.
Got it. So and again, this is the diversity of then the market plan. So you're going to be at least short term and maybe beyond, who knows, right? Selling grapes. Then you're going to make your own wines and have those wines available online. You would also be able to probably get a wholesaler's license and sell to local restaurants and so forth. So don't forget that's an option for you. It's not expensive, and because you're so small and you wouldn't need a great deal of distribution, that could be something.
Yeah, and possibly make an arrangement with some of the community tasting rooms in Paso Robles.
Yep, get downtown on the square and or nearby, and go to where the people are, because you're pretty well towards San Miguel. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so you're not on the major thoroughfare. Um, and then, are you planning to have anything at the winery as a tasting room, or it's just not really set up for that?
It's not really set up, to be honest with you. We may be able to do something, but to be honest with you, if I can avoid it there, we would prefer that.
Right. Yeah,
Rather than
absolutely. Yeah,
that,
because
if we could set up a crush pad, that would be more important to us.
right. So then it becomes a matter of your vision, your mission, and your goals, and aligning with the idea. Remember that if you make one wine, you're going to have a certain amount of product. You'll have focus, and you'll have more a more significant volume of a single wine, right? And because you've got the Zin and the Petite Syrah, then inherently it's probably going to be a blend, a red blend. Or you could say, you know what? Okay, we're going to make a Zinfandel, we're going to make a Petite Syrah, we're going to make a Cabernet, and maybe a red blend, right?
Right.
So these are the kind of things that you get to to play with in your business planning. As to the question, Primitivo or Zinfandel is really going to be how much demand is there for Primitivo, and is the distinction of having Primitivo a plus or a minus? So this gets to part of the SWOT analysis. And I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, there's nothing that prevents you from selling it as Primitivo. If you're selling the fruit, the buyer gets to determine what the name is going to be on it, right?
I think so. I'm trying to get a straight answer still. So, that's why I'm asking you the question. Should we go with Primitivo or Zin?
The path of least resistance is absolutely Zinfandel. The unique factor and maybe a selling point would be Primitivo.
Yeah, have to do some more research.
Yep, exactly. And maybe ask some people and see what you can see in restaurants and when you go out. And again, this is part of doing the homework. How are you going to reach people with your website? When we get into this part of things, what's the persona? What do you envision is the kind of person? And so a persona is saying, Jeff is 58 years old. He lives in San Francisco or whatever. He goes to Paso Robles. He loves the wines from there. He buys online, and he's looking for new and different things. And then are there enough Jeffs and other personas like him that you would be able, to get enough traction to sell at full price all of your production, right?
Right.
So this is the process again of taking the macro and drilling it down, and and again, whether you're a mega winery or whether you're a few acres outside of Paso Robles, that's how you can make your decision, and do a SWOT analysis of Zinfandel. strengths of Zinfandel, it's very popular, it's well known. One of the strengths is it's widely distributed, etc. Weakness of Zinfandel, it's really well known, it's a crowded marketplace, cutting through the clutter, it's hard to differentiate yourself, etc. Right? So what are the opportunities then for Zinfandel? What are the threats for Zinfandel? And then do the same for Primitivo. And
Yeah.
that'll kind of help you get through the idea.
Right.
Okay? So the SWOT analysis is a very important part of the decision-making process, and kind of drilling down to make the best possible decision. Just as an aside, for any MW students out there, it's also, this is a great discussion for, you have acquired X vineyard or vineyard property in here and here. Compare and contrast what decisions you would be making and why. What would you plant, etc. So it boils down to the same decision tree, if you will. Okay. Then the other thing is, so try to, in your vision plan, also consider what in the future would it look like if you had, let's say, a red blend in a high-end Cabernet, in a high-end red blend even, right? Versus how much more trouble is it? How much harder to sell if you had 3 wines or if you had 4 wines or more? So I'm doing a winery search for a China client right now in Australia. And these wineries, I was looking at a winery today, they're making 5,000 cases of wine and they make 20 different wines.
Wow.
And it's like, what are you guys, crazy? No wonder you're selling the goddamn place.
Wow.
So you know, think about it, and then look for each of the possibilities. What's Petite Sirah doing? Look at the grape prices. Look at the sales volumes. What is Zin doing? See if you can find any. You know, Google some data. See if people are making wine lists with Primitivo, because I think it still remains a really, really small, you know, market opportunity at this point. And then, of course, you know, Cabernet's the blue chip. It's the #1 selling variety, certainly King and Paso Robles. It also has the greatest potential for a high price. With the exception, there are a lot of really great red blends now that are even fairly obscure. So look at The Prisoner and look at what other people doing at a higher price that could be a viable option. And then maybe you end up with, you know, maybe a pricing matrix that you've got your reserve Cabernet, this and that. You've got your high-end red blend, and maybe a little bit of Zinfandel and a little Petite Sirah at a more popular price or something like that. So you also want to structure for flexibility down the road if things change, so that you don't have to replant and go through all that crap again, so you know what that looks like.
The other thing that we're toying around with is maybe taking some of this and putting it in some bourbon barrels, or maybe we'll take our crap wine and put it in bourbon barrels.
Yeah.
And to sort of round out, I know you said you shouldn't have too many types of wines, but these are just the reds that we have. And I was thinking about maybe adding, whether it just be some shiners or get a little bit of bulk wine, to add some Chardonnay and maybe some Rosé or White Zin to the mix.
Yes.
What do you think about that? Just to give people a full selection.
Right. But remember, what you're doing online and your outreach and so forth, the more diversity you add to the portfolio, the harder your marketing messaging becomes and so forth. So beware the sirens call of those additions. But I'm not saying don't do it, just do it strategically and very, very carefully. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And
yes.
if you do it with bulk wines, and also in the whisper market, you know, hanging out with Gary Eberly and, hey, Gary, if you ever have some products, you know, we're looking for this or that. Remember that the Shiner market is very opportunistic and can be really challenging from a sustainability model. And the bulk market is very opportunistic, but would allow you to start and to continue on a more sustainable pathway.
Right.
Okay. And so again, not saying, I mean, if you run across something, or, you know, and again, a lot's going to depend on how you're marketing, who you're attracting to your site, to your storefront, what kind of a following you're cultivating. And who knows, maybe you could do a Cameron Hughes play and say, you know, here are the wines we're passionate about, but we also keep our ear to the ground looking for great opportunities. When these wines come up, they're available for a short period of time. We may or may not have them again. And so that could be another place where you could, you know, turn some revenue, do something unique, have people tuning back into your site and keeping in touch.
Yeah.
Cool. All righty. Then what to do on the fence? Your fence vineyard could be any kind of cool story, and build a story around it. Like you say, it could be Cabernet Franc, it could be Petit Verdot, it could be, you know, any number of things. But one of the things a lot of people are surprised is, ask Gary Eberly how many tons per acre he gets from his Muscat.
Okay. Is that going to be a positive response?
Big grapes in big bunches.
Oh, wow.
Everywhere. And that could be just a fun if you're looking for something additional. I'm not saying do it or don't do it, but keep an open eye that they taste delicious, that they make a wine that can also, you know, Mondavi Moscato d'Oro sells for the equivalent of $60 a bottle, and serves a really killer purpose, and it's a great cash flow item. And that being said, also look carefully at how much those grapes sell for in ton per acre, but also keep in mind, you know, you could make a Fences Moscato with a story about your fence and how you're growing it and stuff like that. Just as a possibility of a portfolio addition.
Well, I really do need to talk to some of my neighbors like Gary Eberly and try to get some of their feedback. Certainly, he's the original guy out there, isn't he? So
in many ways, yes, yeah, because you know, the whole thing with Estrella Winery was the big footprint there, and there was an attachment to Penn State and to football, and I think Gary was a tackle for Penn State, and who was the guy?
Yes, I read that story. Yeah.
Yeah, but who was the famous football player who was one of the investors?
Oh, that I don't know.
No, look that up. Also, are you a football guy at all?
Sure.
Yeah, you would go, oh wow, he played for the Steelers, and now I'm driving myself crazy. Hang on.
uh, Stella. There you go.
Winery. Oh, Rocky Blair.
Oh, see?
Yep. That's all I needed to do was start thinking about it. So Rocky Bleier, right? Actually, when Estrella first came out, I met him in Atlanta when I was a retailer because they had him out doing the PR circuit. And so if you see Gary, give him my love. He's a really, really great friend.
I sure will.
And actually, you could go ahead and use my name as an introduction. Say, hey, some idiot named Tim Hanna said I had to call you.
I may do that because I may hit him up for a job.
Yeah, and that too, because working, whether it's even in a tasting room or in production or whatever, huge benefits and yeah. Okay. So, anyways, and let's keep this conversation going now to sort of close out for today. Any further questions along these lines, and we can continue to speculate and to look at how this is evolving for you.
Yeah, I don't have any questions right now. It's all a little bit overwhelming going between the two places, and hopefully it'll be up there permanently in a few weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're starting to do more of the strategic plan. This critical thinking goes on at night. As soon as I'm done off with you, I'll be outside having a glass of wine and doing some critical thinking with my wife.
Yeah.
And I think we will dive more into a SWOT analysis on what grape we should plant on that 4 acres.
Yeah, and it could be just something that you are personally passionate about. It's something that you think would be a neat story in a blend, but it's a marketing decision. At the end of the day, it's the procurement at the very beginning of the supply chain, and then what you envision and how that works and how your business goes down the line. So thanks. It makes a really great, I think, discussion for everybody in the class.
I hope so. I hope I'm not boring them.
No, hey, you're the one showing up. You get the attention. All right, buddy. That's about it for today. And if that's good for you, Wednesday we'll start to dive into who the hell are consumers and what do they really want.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Talk to you soon, my friend. Thanks.
Sure, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.